It's Kelly from Tutor Hustle for Teachers. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Today I have a very special guest who's coming back to visit us. It is Shaun Morgan, the teacher money coach. And I'm really excited to have Shaun here today because he's going to be talking to us about different types of budgeting. And I don't know about you, but that's something that I can never quite wrap my head around, especially when I was in the classroom and trying to manage my salary and all the deductions that come off of it, and just sometimes just trying to make ends meet, never mind thrive on a teacher's salary, and use your side hustle money wisely and all of that. So I'm really excited that Shaun is here today to shed some light on this topic. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you for the welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Good, very good. So what are these three types of budgets you were telling me about? That there's actually three different budgeting styles, which is pretty exciting because maybe one will work for me.
So there are lots of things to consider when doing a budget, and I actually want to take a step back from budgeting for a second. So we'll get to the budgeting systems, which you can figure out what works for you. But before you even get to budgeting, you need to actually do a step before, like a pre-budget, which is called tracking your spending. So when people say, "Oh, I'm going to write a budget," they sit down and they say, "I'm going to spend $600 on food and $1,400 on my car or whatever." They just like throw out numbers that are completely meaningless because you don't know how much you're spending. You just don't. You just don't have any idea how much you're spending. So unless you track your spending, you can't build a smart budget to begin with. So tracking your spending is just the first step. Without any notion of how much you're going to spend on anything, just write it down. I spent this much on groceries today. I spent this much on entertainment today. I spent this much on clothes today. I spent this much on this. I spent this much on that. And every time you make a transaction of any kind, writing it down and then categorizing those, saying, okay, this is food, this is house, this is car. And if you go around and you categorize those at the end of the month, you get an idea of where you're at. And then you do it another month. And then you do it
Makes
another
sense.
month. And until you've done 3 months worth, you have no idea where you're spending your money. So that's really the first step before you can do any type of a budget, right? Any type of an actual, plan, because a budget is a lesson plan, right? This is what I think I'm going to get done this month with my money. And
Hmm.
spoiler alert, as we know with lesson plans, they often don't actually work the way they're supposed to. But it's the plan, right? But before you have a plan, you need to know where you're going. And that's where your tracking your spending comes into play.
Okay, I love that analogy. I've never actually heard that before, but I love that analogy of a budget being like a lesson plan. That's like, wow, that's really good. That's gonna change my perspective on it, I think. And okay, so track your spending. Can you also go back through 3 months worth of bank statements and credit card statements? Would that work as well?
You can. You just need to make sure that you're aware of any cash that you spent, because
Mm.
cash doesn't show up on a bank statement usually. If you have just like a lot of cash in your pocket, some people like to do that. So that's why I don't always recommend the bank statements. Also, the other problem with bank statements is if you don't have the receipt on hand, like say you went to Walmart and you bought, $67 worth of groceries, but you also bought a bike helmet. I don't know. That's not a grocery, right? So you need to realize that that's going to be a split expense. That one bank statement of $97 is going to be partially groceries and partially entertainment or exercise or whatever category you want to put a bike helmet in. So that's why going back to those bank statements aren't as helpful unless you hoard the receipts and you happen to have them on hand where you can categorize those, because it's not going to be as easy to categorize.
That makes a lot of sense. And I actually, and you know what, whenever I've tried to do that, I find the worst one is Amazon because you have all these, it just shows up as Amazon on your credit card statement. And you're like, what did I buy from there? Because you can buy anything from Amazon, right? From, yeah, groceries to toiletries to a bike helmet to whatever, and it's like, what did I buy? So actually that makes a lot of sense to write down what you actually did buy so you can go back and know. So if you have to spend 3 months, this is a big commitment. You have to spend 3 months tracking your spending, but a very worthwhile commitment for sure. And then what's the next step in the budget plan?
Yeah. So once you have an idea of where you're spending your money, then you can create that lesson plan, right? If you realize that you're spending, $500 every single month on Amazon on random trinkets, and you're like, I don't want to be spending $500 a month on Amazon on random trinkets, then your plan, your budget, that lesson plan would be to cut that down, right? Now, you don't want to necessarily go cold turkey and be like, okay, I'm going to spend $0 on Amazon, because that's going to just demoralize you really, really fast. But you can make the plan like, this month I'm going to spend this much money. I'm not like, this is my hard and fast line of where I'm going to spend, right? And then, I'm going to spend this much money on food. I noticed I was spending a bit too much because I went out to eat a lot, or I was buying, a bunch of food and then throwing it away. So you can make plans to start cutting back on different things that maybe don't matter as much to you. So that way you have the extra, money to put towards things that do matter, start saving, start investing, and so forth. So that's what the budget is, right? You are just saying, this is where I want my dollars to go every single month. Not the budget is not meant to be a straitjacket that constrains you. It's meant to be a plan that can be adjusted with the realization that you only have so many dollars every single month that you can spend. So if you are going to adjust away from spending money on Amazon, you can use it somewhere else. Or if you have to spend more money on food because you ran out of food, you're going to have to take that from somewhere else. So that's the budgeting process, is just sitting down and determining, based on the categories that you spend on, where are you going to put those dollars to work. And that make sure that includes how much you're going to save, how much you're going to invest. That's part of budgeting. Budgeting is saying, this is the total number of dollars that I have coming in on average, because your dollars coming in might fluctuate a little bit. But this is what's coming in every single month. I'm going to spend this much here, this much here, this much there, save that much. So that way, when you get to the end, you have $0 that aren't allocated out to something.
That's really good. I like how you use the word want, because it gives you, like, usually when I think of a budget, I think of like, oh man, this is so oppressive, and I have to, spread my dollars out so thin here and there. But I like how you use the word want, because it's actually really empowering, because the budget is about seeing where you want your money to go and deciding if it's actually going that in that place. And it's about awareness, and only when you have that awareness, like you talked about with tracking your spending, can you really decide what you want to do with your money and make a conscious decision about it. So that's really I really like that. I like that perspective on it, of doing what you want with your money. That's really good. So what are the three styles of budgeting?
I know that you really want to get there, but we're not there
I
yet even.
do.
So there are styles and there are systems. So what I talked to you about was systems of budgeting, and that is I think actually the most important thing, because the styles of budgeting all come down to the same thing, really. They just are a different way of approaching it. So you need to determine how you're going to go about creating your style of budget. Although in my opinion, it's not as important, but some people don't want to have an oppressive budget. So they say, I'm just going to do percentages, right? I'm going to spend, 20% is going to go into saving, 80% is going to go into spending. Done. That is called an 80-20 budget. I think it's a little too loosey-goosey. I think that, especially as a teacher on a lower income salary, you need to, keep it tighter than that. If you have, hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in, then that's, more doable. And even someone who makes, $100,000 in a low cost of living area, that's more doable. But if you, in the tight, living situation, maybe that might not be the best choice. And then there's the two most popular budget systems out there, or budget styles out there. I need to use my wording correctly. Budget styles out there are the envelope system and the zero-based budget. The envelope system is where you literally put in envelopes. Back in the day when people used cash all the time, they'd put cash in envelopes and say, this envelope is for car, this is for mortgage, this is for food. And if you ran out of money in that envelope, you're done. This is the system that Dave Ramsey always talks about. It's his pet project is make sure everybody in the world uses the envelope system and no one ever uses debt ever again. That's his thing. So if you're putting your money in envelopes, you can't spend more than what's in the envelope without taking it out of another envelope. And that's the envelope system. That's the one that most people think of when they think of budgeting, because it's it's that constraining factor of, I only have this much, I can't spend more. And it's doesn't have to be that way, because once again, you can be flexible. You can pull money out of an envelope to move it here or there, but you just need to be aware that there's a hard and fast cap at the top that you don't spend beyond. And when we get to it, we'll talk about ways you can do that digitally, because I have a feeling that most people listening to a YouTube podcast are not using cash for all of their purchases, but I could be wrong. So that's one. And then the other one's a zero-based budget, which is kind of the updated version of that, where you just, it doesn't matter how you're spending the money, like on a credit card or a debit card or a cash. You just categorizing those things. And that's where you have, how much goes in to each category. You say, okay, I've spent, $1,000 on this category. I only have $1,000, so I cannot spend any more on that category if I don't want to go over, or I'm going to have to, reduce the amount I spend on a different category. And that's called a zero-based budget, where you have every dollar giving a job, and you just determine the amounts by category in that way. And once again, it's tomato, right? They're the same. A budget is budget. You have only so much money you can spend. And if you spend more than that, you're in debt. If you spend less than that, you have a surplus. And that's just how it's going to go. So those are the styles of budgeting that people talk about. And you can determine how you want to do that. But once you've done that, then you need to figure out how you're going to actually mechanically do your budget. And I think this matters the most, because if you don't do the right mechanical system for you, you're going to not do it, right? If you can't choose a system that's going to create the habits that you need to have a budget, because a budget is a habit. You have to get in the behavior of budgeting. It's not going to work. So I've tried all three of these systems. First, most popular system, the one that everyone loves, is you have an app that does it for you. And I'll talk about some apps a bit later, but just to give you an overview, right? You have an app, you put all your credit card information into the app, and anytime you spend, it pops it into that app. The app looks at what you spent on and says, oh, you spent this much on this category. Boom, it puts it in magically, and then yay, your budget's being done for you. That's the app system, and there's a lot of different apps that do this for you. There's a couple of really popular ones I'll talk about, but there's so many apps that will do that. The second system is an Excel spreadsheet. You can do this, actually, my favorite way for people to do this is to do it with like a Google form and then a Google sheet, right? So you can create a Google form that says, how much did you spend? What category did you spend on? And you can like just fill it out anytime that you make a purchase. And then your Google form will automatically populate your Google sheet with your budget. It'll say like,
That's
oh,
so
you're
cool.
spending this much on this category, that much in that category. And it'll like say, okay, this whole column is your food category. And then you can have like the sheet have like a total that just like pops up automatically. So you almost create your own app, but then you have just more control, because it's like your spreadsheet, and you can use that anywhere. I think that's the best way to go about using an Excel spreadsheet. The reason that you might want to use an Excel spreadsheet over an app as well is that you're able to run all sorts of calculations and numbers in the Excel spreadsheet. So if you're someone who really likes spreadsheets, then that's great. And then the last way, which is actually the way that I prefer to do, is on pen and paper. It's there, it's in my face. I can leave the pen and paper on my counter, so that way I can look at it and see it. And when I come in the door after making a purchase, I have the receipt, I write it down. And man, when I've made a big purchase, it is painful to write that down, right? It's just like, oh man. And then you do the calculation. So it's just more like real. It's not like, oh, I made the purchase and it just automatically does it. Like I have to physically go through the motions of saying that I made this purchase. And that helps me keep myself accountable. That's why I choose to do it. And it's right there. So like you see it. An Excel spreadsheet, you have to go out of your way to open up the Excel spreadsheet to type something in, or to open up the form to type something in, as opposed to it being, right there in your face. The app, you don't even have to type it in. It just does it for you, out of sight, out of mind. It can be really easy to not look at the budget while the app is budgeting for you. So that's the downfall of the electronic versions. They're cleaner, they're swifter, they're easier for the calculations. So you have to just determine which one of these is going to work for you. Do you want an app that does it for you because you don't want to have to worry about making the fun calculations in your Excel? Do you want the Excel because you want to be able to move the numbers and then think about it and then really dive into the nerdiness of the numbers? Or do you want the pen and paper because you know that you're not going to do it if it's not in your face?
That's a really good. That's really good advice. It's really good options for different types of people and what you like to do. I mean, and I agree with you about the pen and paper. I've tried that. I've tried that system as well, and um, it didn't last for me. But maybe I have to try it again. There's probably different ways of going about it, right? And it is painful to write down. Like it's so painful to write down, especially when you have a lot of transactions per day, and then you really see it, and you're like, oh my God, I'm spending this much money a day in all these different places. It's like, wow, you don't realize that in one day that much money is going out to all these different places. And it's like it's a really good sense of awareness. And it's like, do I really need to be spending every single day this much money? You know what I mean? Like could there be a day where I don't spend any money? So it's kind of it's a pretty good wake up call, definitely. And always when you physically write things down, it's always, it's always just that much more meaningful, right? And you just like can take in the information that much more effectively. So I think that's really good advice. So that's what worked for you, writing it down in a book?
Yeah, I started with the app, and the app, I never looked at it. It just, or like I'd spend, and then like I'd look at it like, a week and a half later, and I'm like, oh yeah, the app, and it'd be like, warning, you're overspending, right? And they might be better now. They might be able to be like, by the way, you have this much. They might probably have notifications and things. I just haven't done it in years because I'd look at it and be like, well, darn, there goes my budget. Like I just spent months of like, whoops, like it was never, the feedback wasn't fast enough. We know as teachers that feedback matters. So if you're able to look at it daily and get the feedback, that's important. But if you're not looking at it and you're not getting that feedback, it's not going to change your behavior. The same thing with the Excel spreadsheet. My wife was keeping up on the Excel spreadsheet. It was great. I never looked at it, and then I'd look at it like 2 months later. I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we spending on? Like and that's probably our fault. We needed better communication between ourselves, like between our partnership there, because it just, if you're not looking at it, if you're not getting that feedback immediately from it, it's not going to make a difference. So having the pen and paper, like I write down my transactions, she writes down her transactions, then we can both see it as we're going. Like it really has helped us to keep track of everything. But once again, you said you tried writing down on a piece of paper and it didn't work for you. That tells me that you probably need a different system, right? A different system would probably work for you. It's all about what's going to work for you. If you cannot remember to write it down, if you cannot remember to go into an Excel spreadsheet, then use an app, because it's going to be better than nothing, because at least you're going to be able to have a record you can look back on, every week or every month, to be like, okay, this is where I was. What can I do to try and change my behavior? That's, you need to have something that's giving you that feedback, or nothing's going to change.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the nice thing about the app is there's so many things I find that come off automatically, like automatic payments that come off your credit card or out of your bank or whatever. Like the orthodontist, for example, like every month they deduct their money from the credit card, and I don't see them doing it. That's also the nice thing about cash when you talked about with the envelope system. The nice thing about cash is you actually experience it leaving your pocket, right? Whereas when stuff
Right.
comes automatically off your credit card, it just happens automatically. You don't really think about it. So that was one of the things for me writing things down, is that and actually I see this now. I probably should get in a better habit of checking my statements every single day, and then write them in the book. So if you have things that automatically come off your credit card or out of your bank, do you just check your statements every day and then write them in your book where you write down all your transactions?
I usually do my checking on like my credit card statements every Sunday. I sit down, and I make sure that I haven't missed any transactions that have come up. Just because, sometimes I'm in a hurry and I forget to write down a receipt. I used to be much better about writing down every single receipt as it came in. But like, if I miss something every Sunday, I can be like, okay, look at all of the bank statements. Do I have that written down? Yes, no, and I'll go through and write it down. And that's the day that I'll make my totals to see where I'm at as well. And then that works for me. Sometimes it's a little slow. I don't get the feedback fast enough because I'm only doing this once a week, and that can cause some problems sometimes. But no system's going to be perfect. But like you said, the automatic things automatically pop up in the apps, and that's really really helpful because it can be easy to forget those. The subscription that you had once and you totally forgot it existed is going to be popping up into that app, and you might be like, why am I spending this money? Oh my goodness, I've had this subscription for years. My brother's best friend subscribed to like a video game when he was like 8, and his parents paid it for like a decade because he didn't
Oh my
notice it,
gosh.
and he stopped playing it. It's just like those things that you need to just make sure you're checking consistently, otherwise you're going to spend on things that don't matter to you, right? That's the type of stuff that we're looking for when we're budgeting. And you got to make sure that you're paying attention to those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. I think that's really good advice, and that's why you have to have a system, like you said, of checking. So writing down, and I think for me with the writing down is it was just too like too much because I was trying to write down every single thing and check the credit card every day, and oh my gosh, and then it would just get overwhelming and I would give it up, right? But I like your system of, when you physically go in a store or even go online and spend money, then write it down, if it's a one-off transaction. And then every once a week or once a month or whatever you do, check your statement for those automatic transactions. And I really like that. And so it's so important to check your statements because of what you said. Like you have all these subscriptions that you don't even know exist and you're still paying them. That's a huge way for money to slip through people's fingers, I think, subscriptions for sure.
Yeah,
You have to check
subscriptions
those.
are just getting more and more prevalent. I mean, like you can subscribe to Subway. I mean, like who I don't know why you subscribe to Subway, but it's like, you can
Yeah.
subscribe to anything these days. So you just need to be really careful with those because that's what they're trying to do is just get that consistent income to their business. And they give you perks and whatnot, but still like that they want that consistent income, and they're almost banking on you forgetting because that's how they're going to make a lot of their money.
Yeah, that is so true. And I've made that mistake with subscriptions too. I find that now that I have my own business, like my own educational business, I have to track my expenses because if you have, and this is the good thing about a side hustle too, it really teaches you a lot about money. Even if you don't make any money from it, is at least you'll learn a lot about money, right? And you have to when you have your own business track all of your expenses and look at them. And that's like that was one of the big things I learned is wow, there's so many subscriptions. Do I really need these? Because you think at the time, like, oh my gosh, I need to subscribe to that, educational website or whatever it is, but then you end up never using it. So it's good to check, like routinely check and make sure you're still using that stuff. And it's absolutely necessary for your bottom line. Otherwise, get rid of it,
Right.
right?
Sometimes you use it for like a month and then you end up paying for the whole year. Like, it, you can subscribe and then unsubscribe, right? That kind of thing. It's, just choosing those actions carefully.
Hmm. Yeah. And
Do you
it's a
want to talk
nice.
about the apps that people can use to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
the
Yeah,
budgeting?
yeah, give me your recommendations on apps because now I was all about the apps before this interview, but now that I've spoken to you, I'm like, I got to get my pen and paper out again. But anyway, yeah, tell me about the apps.
I just didn't want us to forget about that because I had teased that before, and it'd be
Yeah,
embarrassing to say like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about it, and then I don't. So the most popular one that I know of is called Mint. It's just I think it's by Quicken. I think they might even not be called Mint anymore, but it's one of the Quicken. They do TurboTax. It's just that company into it. Mint is what it's called, and it's really good at the auto syncing. It's just very very slick at bringing everything in, doing it for you. You can categorize it, do your zero-based budget with it, all that. It's pretty simple to use in that way. That's the one that I used initially, and like I said, it did its job well. I just wasn't good at checking it. So that's the one of the most popular ones. If you want to be a bit more hands-on but have like an app that's more slick than an Excel spreadsheet, you need a budget. It's called YNAB by most people that are in the know. It is another one. You need a budget, and
Oh,
YNAB.
Y
So
N
if
A
you look
A
up
B.
YNAB, that's
Mm-hmm.
what's gonna pop up. And
Okay.
like I said, it's just more of a hands-on tool for budgeting. So that's another option. I believe that one has a paid subscription to use though. So just keep in mind that you're going to have to pay for some of these if you want to use all their tools and widgets. The simplest app that I know of is Every Dollar. This is once again Dave Ramsey. I'm not an affiliate with Dave Ramsey. I just when you talk about budgeting, it's hard not to talk about Dave Ramsey because that's like his thing. So Every Dollar, it's easy. It's just like bare bones. The envelope system. This much goes here. This much goes there. This much goes there. Don't spend more than that. And that's what it's there for. So those are the three that come up the most when people are talking about a budgeting app. And once again, there are so many out there. So you can just look around and see what you like. But those three are pretty simple and popular because they work. And then another app that once again, not affiliated with these people, but I've seen it. I've talked to the people about it. I don't use it because I'm not a debit card person. But if you want to do like the cash envelope system, but you want to use a card instead of cash, there's an app called Cube, Qube, that on the app you get to say, I want to have money from this category available right now. So you say like, I'm going to spend from this category, and then you swipe the card and it pulls money from that category. So that way you have to use money from the categories that you are spending in. So that way when you swipe, like if you don't have money in that category, it says, sorry, you're out of money. Right.
Wow.
And so just like the cash envelope system, when you open up the envelope, you're like, oh, I only have $50 in this transaction, 60. I'm going to have to, pull something away from this transaction because I can't afford it. That's the same thing that's happening there. And if you are in one of those situations where you just swipe that credit card or anything like that, you're getting into a lot of debt. But you don't want to use cash because cash is unwieldy or it's difficult to use. So there's a money shortage or whatever your reasoning is. This is an alternative to allow you to have a card, have it simple, have it sleek, but not overspend. Because you have those categories set up in place. So that way you're not going to spend beyond your mortgage because you have like a mortgage category or a rent category. So you're like, okay, I'm not going to spend that money because I'm not going to pull from there when I'm swiping for my food. So that way you don't get in trouble and you need to use your credit card to get out of that problem. You can just keep your spending in check.
That's a really good idea. So we have Mint by Intuit. Might be called something different now, but that's Intuit is the company. YNAB, you need a budget. Every Dollar by Dave Ramsey and Cube. And of course, we have to be careful that there's no subscription fee for these apps, right? So always check that right before you sign up for the app. Make sure that you're using the
And,
free version.
some people that use You Need a Budget love it so much they want to spend the money on it for all their things. So it's what you want. Some people are really into budgeting. If you are not really into budgeting, I recommend the free version. If you are, then dive in and get all the bells and whistles and all the cool things that they have to offer. It's just up to what you want to spend your money on. Because once again, a budget's a plan, and the plan is what do you want, not what do you fancy in the moment, not what do you think you need, but you need to focus on like, okay, I have to use these things to survive, obviously. And then with the rest of my money, what do I really want to spend it on? What is my end goal? What is the thing that's going to light me up? Because if you don't have that in place, you're going to end up spending money on random things, random subscriptions to educational websites, a subscription to a budgeting app that you're going to forget about and not use. And then you're going to spend more money on a budgeting app, or you're going to buy a bunch of things on Amazon, which is everyone's bane of their existence right now, right? It's just, you're going to spend things where you don't want to spend it if you are not paying attention, and budgeting, tracking your spending is the way to pay attention. So that way you only spend on what you really want.
That's great advice. That's really great advice, Shaun. Thanks so much. And it gives us a lot of freedom around our money, even if we don't have very much, to start with. Like there's a lot of freedom. And once you start to give yourself that freedom and that power, then hopefully your money will grow and you'll have more and more. So you'll have even more freedom, right? Yeah, that's really good advice. Thanks so much for sharing this, Shaun, all these budgeting tips and the different styles and the different apps. And of course, I'll link the apps below in the description box. And I will also link your podcast and your YouTube channel below so people can get some more information about teacher money from you, because it's a great thing. You're the only person I know that talks about it. So it's great to get this advice. Thank you so much. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And thanks so much, Shaun. It was great to see you again. Bye, everybody.